Hello everyone and welcome to another News Coolum video. For me, it's 30 seconds. For you, it could be days, right? I'm just trying to record a few of these different videos back to back while we have the golden hour, right? Whatever. Uh, but, coast to coast EVs, we have a upcoming live stream. So I'll try to get this one published before that live stream goes live. But we do want to address the federal EV tax credit, right? And for those of you who've been living under a rock, the federal EV tax credit is going to expire September 30th, right? 30 days has September, November. I have no idea where we go from there. It expires at the end of September, and so that's just a little over a week and a half from now. And so if you haven't bought an EV, run out and buy one now. But I did want to talk about it because, what we're really looking at this point is what this impact is going to be in terms of overall EV sales. And I wanted to not shy away from a couple of political comments on it, and then also talk about the possible impact to sales, and and of course just the overall economics of it as well. So I've probably partaken in more federal EV tax credits than most. The Chevy Volt also qualified for the federal EV tax credit. So there's that as well. I think just getting a couple of the things in terms of the politics and the economics out of the way, we have to understand that the federal EV tax credit has always been a regressive tax credit. And what that means is the less you make, the less it benefits you, or the more it punishes you, however you want to look at it. So the lower your income, just the less it matters overall. Now, they did make some adjustments to the federal EV tax credit that allowed the leasing agencies to absorb it, allowing people to then lease an EV for a substantial discount that wouldn't have been available before. But I hate to be old grandpa here, but leasing is for suckers. I actually do kind of agree with that, right? Like, I know there are lease terms that are beneficial or whatnot, but you're essentially just renting a car when you think about it. All a lease really is a long-term rental. So you spent all of this money, and at the end of it, you have nothing. And so sometimes that's good because, at the end of a term paying off a car loan, sometimes you have less than nothing, right? Sometimes you're underwater. So in that regard, right, ending a automotive lease agreement owing nothing, yeah, I can see that there's some financial reasoning behind it. But this again, and this is echoing a theme that I've mentioned for a long time now, our transportation needs really don't change all that much. So that old idea of you lease, and then at the end of your lease, you get to upgrade to better technology that better suits your needs. Well, what were your travel needs to begin with? And if you were leasing a car that didn't meet your travel needs, how were you addressing that shortfall, right? So it just never made sense to me, like this idea that you lease EVs because the technology is evolving. Only if what you're doing is leasing a car that doesn't meet your needs, meaning you need another car anyway. And this is maybe tying into that whole theme about most of this, to be perfectly honest, is rich people's problems, including the EV tax credit, because it was regressive, because it was never really a benefit for low income EV buyers. It was a benefit for middle income and wealthier EV buyers. And the reason is the way that tax credit works is it reduces your tax liability. The first Chevrolet Volt that I bought, my tax liability was not high enough to actually take advantage of the full $7,500 credit. So here I was, leaving $1,500, $2,000 on the table because between my income and my tax liability, I did not qualify for a full 7,500, right? And so part of that was just my working situation at the time, but I was making well above, right, median average salary, median average wage at that time. And so for me to not qualify as a single filer, it was kind of shocking to me, because then it made me realize, hey, wait a minute. People who are buying EVs right now really are far more affluent than I am, because, I was seeing people absorbing multiple EV tax credits in a single year, where they're saying $15,000 in tax liability. Oh yeah, I can do that. And so really, like I said, it is kind of a first world problem. And then the other sort of political thing I was going to say about it is the irony of the Republicans disliking the tax credit sort of belies an ulterior motive, because the tax credit is ultimately libertarian, right? So when you talk to a lot of Republicans, especially like actual voters within the Republican Party, they will tell you that I'm not conservative, I'm libertarian, right? So what they're telling you is they want less government taxation, less government control. They want, one of the sort of hallmarks or pillars of libertarianism is they believe that the individual knows better how their tax dollars can be spent than the government. Well, what does eliminating the tax credit do? It takes that choice out of the taxpayer's hands, right? So if you're a libertarian, you should be extremely upset that the US government basically said that $7,500 that you feel like you know better how it should be spent, well, we're going to eliminate that option. We're going to take that $7,500 and we're going to spend it on ballrooms and pentagons, right? So, yeah, it's very, very anti-libertarian. And so it's almost like it's a weird thing where the Republican politicians are so gung-ho to attack electric vehicles that they're willing to trod on their own voting base to do so. It's just a weird sort of situation. But again, like I said, from a poor person's perspective, post-capitalist, from my perspective, it's going to be much ado about nothing. We're going to see EV sales decline regardless. Our economy is in shambles. People just aren't making the kind of money that they were making before. There's a lot more uncertainty. People are losing money in the stock market. People are losing their jobs. Governments being downsized, things like that. So there's just less freedom to basically do a big ticket purchase. And I think most of the sales that we've seen in July, August, and September really are in anticipation of that EV tax credit going away. People are basically, we're now in what would normally have been December 2025. These are the EV sales that we would normally be seeing in Q4. But also, like I said, the entire economy is constricting anyway. So we're also just seeing lower big ticket purchases across the board. After September, right, after we get into October, November, December, when that tax credit is no longer there, I do think that we're going to see a flattening or declining of EV sales. But it's not just going to be because of the tax credit. It's also going to be due to the fact that so many EVs that are still currently available for sale are still way too expensive for the average buyer. And again, like I said, if you're talking about the average working class buyer right now, if they wanted to buy an EV, they still wouldn't necessarily qualify for that full $7,500 credit anyway. So I don't think that that is going to be a disincentive for them to buy, right? If you know that buying an EV is going to be better for you than, spending $300, $400, $500 a month in gasoline on an internal combustion car. And yes, this happens a lot. I talk to a lot of people who say buying an EV, their payment, or even a plug-in hybrid, their monthly car payment was less than what they were paying in gasoline alone for their previous vehicle. So there's already a huge financial incentive, even if you're lower income, especially if you commute, to go from a gas car to an EV. The problem is the EV still has to be affordable. And so what I think we're going to see at this point is a natural shift to these lower cost EVs. And when that happens, we'll see a gradual, if not steady, incline again in EV sales. So I think we are going to experience a dip. I think there's no question about that. And it really just, the only question is, how well does our economy survive the next 3 to 6 months? And if we don't go into a full-blown depression, which looks very likely at this point, and some of these EV automakers can start to offer EVs below $30,000. And when I say below, I do mean significantly below $30,000, while also still offering reasonable financing and reasonable assistance in terms of getting into the vehicle. If those two things can happen, we'll see a steady incline in EV sales over time, month over month, year over year. But those two things have to happen. Right now, the only one that looks like they're going to make any sort of significant impact in that regard is GM. The upcoming Chevy Bolt looks to be a winner, looks to be a real winner. And I know some people have asked me to do like a comparison of the Bolt and the upcoming Leaf. There's a lot to like about the Leaf. Problem is, Nissan said they're already going to be constrained on production, and constrained to a lower production level than the first gen Leaf. Like we're talking 2011, 2012, lower total sales numbers for the new Leaf than those. That is crazy to me. So if you're only able to sell 6,000 new Nissan Leafs in 2025 into 2026, you're barely going to be a blip on the radar, right? So it doesn't matter if it's $25,000 at that point. If you're only building 5 to 10,000 of them, you're not going to make a difference. Whereas the Chevy Bolt, I know GM is talking about not adding a second shift, but I think they're doing that as a wait and see. if they come out with, say, a $25,000 Bolt EV that goes close to 300 miles on a charge and has all the other bells and whistles that they're talking about, I think, again, it alone might outsell the rest of Chevrolet's EV lineup combined without the tax credit, without a need for the tax credit. Because if you're in the market for a $25,000 car, either you're extremely frugal relative to your income, or you weren't going to qualify for the tax credit to begin with. So anyway, that was just my quick take, or hopefully quick take, on why the Republicans are axing a libertarian tax credit. And like I said, I think it's going to be much ado about nothing in terms of EV adoption. I think the bigger issues are just the greater socioeconomic problems that we have at play in the United States. But I do see a potential light at the end of a potential tunnel if people can get their heads right and make it happen. So yeah, get your mind right. So anyway, I'd love to hear what you think. Were you able to buy an EV under the tax credit? Are you trying to sneak in under the September 30th marker? Are you interested in the upcoming Chevrolet Bolt or Nissan Leaf or these other claimed $20,000 to $30,000 EVs? As always, thank you for watching.